I found a position doing the TV listings, which was where I found my home there. And I remember thinking, this is really interesting. Everyone who buys the newspaper will read the TV listings. Everyone will read that stuff. It's the only bit of the paper that everyone will read. That thought hit me like a bolt. And so I thought, okay, let's play with this. And so I did. And because the Independent was very serious and kind of posh at the same time, they didn't really take any notice of things like the TV listings, And so I started making up programs and making up characters for programs that already existed and storylines for programs and things of that nature. And pretty soon the TV listings didn't really bear much resemblance to what actually was on television, but were quite funny in their own way.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosner. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the Career Equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Are you thinking about a career change? This summer, Zoe and I will be putting together a short, sprinty course that's going to allow you to step through our process and work through your own career equation stage by stage. The best thing, it's completely free and part of the podcast. So keep an eye out this summer for our summer career sprint.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Career Equation podcast. And today I'm excited to be here at this transitional moment for Jed Novick. Jed is a journalist and university lecturer specializing in bringing new journalism talent to life and helping them to get their first steps up on the rungs of the ladder. And now he is facing a career decision and conundrum himself as he moves into retirement and explores what's next for his age, stage, and aspiration. So a very warm welcome to you, Jed. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Hi, absolute pleasure to be here.
So let's start off with the story so far. Tell us a little bit about the kind of highlights and moments of your career.
It was all a bit of a surprise, really. I didn't go into journalism until relatively late. I went to Journal College when I was 27, and it was complete impulse. And possibly because it was complete impulse, everything went ridiculously well, ridiculously quickly. Within 6 months of leaving Journal College, I was a feature writer for the Times. And that was not supposed to happen like that. But did that for about, 20 years, 25 years. And then floated into academia, which again was the last thing that was on the game plan. I was a man who came out of Manchester Poly with a third. To become a latter-day academic was a bit of a surprise.
It sounds like you're very right person, right time. You use the word floating into, landing into. There's a kind of free form to your agency in your career. Is that a quality that you embody in other aspects of your life?
That sounds really nice and romantic. I'm going to say yes to that.
In other life projects, in family life, adventures, to what extent does this fall into and feel into the right sort of thing for me? Has that been a modality that's worked for you? Do you see it elsewhere?
I guess the proper answer is that I've always been like that. And even when I've tried not to be like that, I've always been like that.
I feel like that's really important to the frame of the discussion that we're going to have. This work is about a measure of kind of intentionality, right? You can still have a kind of squiggly exploratory path. It can still take you in lots of winding and exciting directions. But by its nature, a career conversation is intentional, right? About its agenda and where it wants to take you. But I also really want us to respect and acknowledge and make use of what you know about your nature and what works for you. What's the kind of question you would love to have a bit more clarity around by the time we finish the discussion?
I took redundancy at Christmas this year. So the academic year for me will end next weekend, June the 9th. I just had this overwhelming feeling, a voice that's just getting louder and louder of do something else. And I'd been at Brighton University, I think it's 143 years now I've been there. And I never intended to stay that long. And age clearly comes into it. The next academic year would start, I would be 67. And so I wanted to have another adventure while there was still power in my legs. There's a feeling that if you stay somewhere too long, you stay in a job or a situation too long, your usefulness diminishes as time goes on. There's an over familiarity. You get too comfortable. The system stops working. And for me, being a blooming senior lecturer at Brighton University, marvelous, darling. But it kind of worked, a kind of ridiculous thing to be. I didn't do it as maybe it says in the books you should do it. But then the longer you're there, the more established you become, or the more established I became. And that sort of unusualness passes and you become the norm. My kind of USP kind of went out the window a while ago.
There is the sense as well that kind of in every crisis, there's also an opportunity, right? So in a way, the crisis has become like, I'm established, I've been here, I've done that, I was kind of trailblazing and interesting and as surprised to be here as anybody else was. And now it's become very much the norm and I'm ready to move on. But I imagine also that having been part of an institution for like over a decade, there must be a bit of a combo of excitement and fear. What's your inner world saying about this cutoff point that's coming up?
It is exactly that. It is that blend that you just mentioned. And on the face of it, it's such a stupid thing to do. It's a phrase from the old days, a job for life. But working at university, really, unless you're really stupid, is a job for life. So to knock it on the head seems a really dumb thing to do. But on the other hand, yeah, what the hell?
Just before we dive into your key career moments, I'm going to explain the equation for people who are listening for the first time so they know what we're doing. So I devised this little formula over kind of 20 years of talking to people about their careers that really encapsulates what I heard people to be concerned about when they were talking about, am I thriving in my career? Is my work working? Am I in the right place? What am I going to do next? And the four main buckets of consideration that I wanted them to think about were what kind of innate skills and attributes do they possess that they wanted to be working on and working with? And what do those look and feel like? Because we all know that playing to our strengths is a kind of key element of careers feeling like they're working for you. The second was, what are you into? What do you love? What gives you energy? What are the elements of your passions that you might apply your skills to that will mean that work feels joyful and energizing and brings out the best in you? The third thing is that people want to do work that feels like it matters to them. And what we mean when we say matters changes and is individual to the person. So there's no right or wrong answer, but actually being able to explore, how do I measure and define success and fulfillment in my work according to my own metric, felt to me to be very important for people to do. So those were the first three components, if you like, give the character of the person. But the thing that makes it an equation, skills plus passion plus impact, is that we divide it by the amount of friction in the level of environmental fit that you have in your work. By which I mean, the more the environment of the work really suits you, the better you do. And the more that it doesn't, and that you're constantly rubbing up against kind of irritations, agitations in the working style, in the approach, in the funding, in the people, it could be anything, the harder it is for that person to really thrive and be at their best. So the equation is skills plus passion plus impact divided by levels of friction in your environment. So we're going to go into our first moment, and the first moment is all about skills. So I want you to tell me about a story, about a time in your life where you realized, I'm quite good at this. I have a natural ability for this thing.
So the first time I ever considered that was when I went to Jono College. As soon as I landed there, I realized I was really good at it. I don't really I don't like that terribly English thing of not being able to say if you're good at something, you shouldn't say it, But it was kind of effortless immediately. From absolutely nowhere, I knew I could write. And I knew I could write in a way that communicated good stories.
What an extraordinary discovery. It must have been really joyful.
It's probably a little bit too easy looking back. My natural bent is towards extreme laziness. And no, really. So I would do things and it would work and I would stop because I'd done it. And that was it. And in a sense, it took away the must try harder thing because I never really did try very hard, which again, looking back, was probably not great.
If you were going to try harder in your writing now, what would that look like?
Being a little bit more disciplined about doing it.
Okay.
I'm very, ill-disciplined. And if left to my own devices, I can find things to do in the garden all day long.
So the deadlines were useful then?
Deadlines are fantastically useful. If I don't have a deadline imposed by a third party, then don't hold your breath. Pull up a chair and sit down for a bit, yeah.
For many of us, self-discipline doesn't come easily, even if the activity is something we really want to do. Being witnessed and cheered on often helps us to cross the finish line in a way we might struggle to do alone without support. If you relate to Jed's dilemma, why not find an accountability buddy? Conjure up an artificial deadline. Tell a friend you will send them your book draft, promise a recruiter your CV by a certain date, or schedule a slot at an open mic to share your work. See if you can find a way to make visible what you're up to and to support you to be accountable.
So if we are going to get you writing in this next stage, we're going to need some taskmaster external to you that scares you enough to show up and deliver.
The truth is that's part of the challenge, isn't it? I said that I wanted to leave the uni to have a bit more of a challenge, and part of the challenge is finding a new way of being. Yeah, let's do that.
And just one more thing before we move on from there, which was, you said I was a bit too good at it. I was able to deliver a great job and never really thought that much further about it. But if you were going to add an additional element to your craft back then, what is it that you had in mind that you could have done?
If I'd have carried on doing what I was doing, I would have, been a well-paid columnist with a well-paid column.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was on offer. I could see that. Like I say, I got a job at the Independent and I forged a bit of a singular position there that kind of took everyone a little bit by surprise. But it was very funny. And they were grooming me. I could see they were. And so I obviously ran screaming.
Yeah, there's something here I'm getting as a theme around orthodoxy and nonconformism. So we may need to dig into a little bit more deeply. Okay, brilliant. So let's hear a bit about the Independent, because actually when I asked you about something that you just loved, you said that sort of moment of being around the launch of the Independent was it. Can you tell me a bit take us back to that time and that moment and what it was like?
There's two things there. One is that my proper job before then had been at the BBC. And the BBC was fantastically posh and Oxbridge. It kind of put me on edge and I felt really sort of fish out of water. I mean, again, in retrospect, it was a fantastic job. It was clearly a long time ago and the world was in black and white and no one had heard the word Google. And it was like an in-house Google for radio producers. And radio producers would fill in these little cards and say something like, we're doing a program on warships from the 1800s. Can you find out everything about warships from the 1800s? And off you go, scurrying off to do it. And then you'd get everything together and you'd put it back. Picked up the next card. We're doing something about tea plantations. Okay, right, tea plantation. And, it was completely random and quite fun. But it was going nowhere, so had to leave, then went to the journo thing. And by the time I got to the Independent, and I joined the Independent just as it had launched, just the other side of that, matter of days or maybe a week or something. And the Independent was top fun because it still had that we can do anything, new things, that thing of being new. We can still do this thing. And I just ran around asking what I could do for people. I ended up on the letters page for a while. And then I found a position doing the TV listings, which was where I found my home there. And I remember thinking, this is really interesting. Everyone who buys the newspaper will read the TV listings. Everyone will read that stuff. It's the only bit of the paper that everyone will read. That thought hit me like a bolt. And so I thought, okay, let's play with this. And so I did. And because the Independent was very serious and kind of posh at the same time, they didn't really take any notice of things like the TV listings. And so I started making up programs and making up characters for programs that already existed, and storylines for programs and things of that nature. And pretty soon the TV listings didn't really bear much resemblance to what actually was on television, but were quite funny in their own way. And the first time I got called into the editor's office, I remember this quite clearly. There used to be a monthly prize for the journalist who encouraged and got the most letters, the most reader response.
Oh, yeah.
And every month I got this blooming, and it was a posh pen. And I would get this posh pen every month. And after a few months, the editor, Andreas, he called me into his office because he didn't take any notice of what I was doing, really, until he noticed that all the Mont Blanc pens were going in the same direction.
And what did he say when he called you in?
By that stage, I'd got quite a loyal readership, and people were writing in, suggesting storylines for programs that didn't exist and partners for characters who didn't happen to be there and what have you. And it was being quoted on other TV programs and on radio quizzes and stuff like this. And he was clearly happy by that stage because it was a successful thing.
Yeah, it sounds like mischief and mayhem is inherent to your working style. It sounds like here you're already describing an environment in which you were having a really significant impact. You're flooded with Mont Blanc pens and lots of letters, and people obviously engaging and having fun. Tell me a little bit more about that moment in time and how you knew that what you were doing mattered.
There's a fantastic moment, and I'm sure every journalist goes through this, when you're on the tube or whatever, and you look down and there's someone there and they're reading your bit in the paper, and they laugh.
Yeah.
And that's just great. That's just lovely. I don't know. I struggle with words like impact or meaning or anything like that. But it was certainly nice, and it made me feel good.
So your measure is something like sort of slightly transmitting joy and being recognised, being liked, making connection, I guess. And if I was going to ask you, with your academic hat on, why does journalism matter as a field, and the whole spectrum of it, from news and breaking news to the cartoons and the chuckles and everything else, what would be your explanation for why it's a valuable profession?
The world's in a bit of a state, and we need journalists to shine a light on people who are doing bad things. And the reason why bad stuff happens, and the reason why people have thoughts of a negative nature and what have you right now, is because I don't think journalists are doing that very well. The basic role of the journalist, which is to hold power to account. And I think some of the most august journalistic bodies of our country are actually doing the exact opposite of that. But perversely, I think journalism is very important, except any kind of journalism that I've ever done. The entertainment and making people laugh and all that is important, but it's not very important.
Valuable, perhaps.
Yeah.
In its own way. Yeah. And so let's talk about environments to bring out the best in you, the worst in you. And let's have a moment where you really felt like the environment hadn't been serving you to deliver on your best.
And ended up at the Daily Express, which is a really weird place to end up. By the time I got there, it was really floundering, but it was not a bad place. It was sold a couple of times down the line. And eventually it was bought by a guy who had made his money as a pornographer. And he wasn't in it for the nobility of journalism, I think it's probably fair to say. And I remember leaving work one night and saying there was one woman left on the arts desk working late. Bye, see you tomorrow kind of thing. That sort of chat you have at the end of the day. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
came in the next day to find that the entire arts department had been sacked.
Well,
Not only had the department been sacked, but the physical desk, the arts desk, had been removed, and all the other desks had shuffled up a little bit so there wasn't a gap.
Leaders, Jed makes an important point. How many times have you experienced the cataclysmic impact of a merger or acquisition on the culture and working style of an acquired business? How might we better preserve the working cultures that made the business desirable to buy in the first place? And how do we remain mindful in gently supporting our new talent to adapt to new ways of working and to integrate without becoming siloed?
It was time to go, and so I left. And then the phone didn't go. And what I realized was that the phone wasn't going to go. I was middle age, I guess you would call it. They're young kids, but not that young, married, house, all that sort of stuff. Qualified to do absolutely nothing.
and you found your way to the uni.
Found the way to the uni, again, kind of stroke of luck. I knew someone who had a job there and said, listen, there's half a job going. Why don't you jump on it? And so I went and I got this, what they call 0.5 job. Didn't really have a clue. And I found I was very lucky again. I found that I really liked the kids. And so did that.
Great. Yeah. So environments where you can be yourself, share your stories and experience and wisdom, nurture talents, have some fun, tell the truth about how things are going. So let's take the insight from the conversation and see if we can structure it into a design statement that gives us your key criteria for thriving at work as we define it now. So I'm going to help you fill in the gaps here. And the first gap is your name. So
Jed Novick.
Beautiful. We'll use my skills. In, what would you say are the kind of top 2 or 3 standouts?
Okay, my skills right now, I think, are communication and mentoring.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And my passion for?
I like young people, actually. I like young people. I think that young people are generally served really badly by our system. The young men, particularly, I think, are, ill-served.
And my passion for being with young people / men. Yeah. 2, how would you describe the ways in which value and worthwhileness, we're not going to say impact or measurement, how would you assess worthwhileness these days?
I've been wrestling with trying to come up with an idea of doing something that supports young, men. I've got a friend who is doing counselling. He's just starting this one, actually. He's just doing counselling for, again, working class kids coming out of education, because mostly they're just left to their own devices without any sort of support structure or help. And if you don't come from a family where your parents can either financially or emotionally support you, you're kind of struggling. I was one of those kids. I didn't have any support, my father died when I was 18. I had no backup, financial or emotional, really.
So you want to fill the gap that you had to work out by yourself. But let me play it back and let's see how this lands, because it's just a first draft, first ideas. So I, Jed, will use my skills in communication and mentoring and my passion for being with young people to give support and help. I've put to first generation or non-traditional folks to find their feet. Let's add environment. So an environment that
can be somewhere warm and be up by the sea. Maybe there's a bar there as well. I don't know. In terms of values, I think these are really important. I think the values of our culture and society, probably not alone in thinking this, are a bit shaky right now. And I think that the influences that people get, and again, this is not rocket science stuff to say, but if you don't have people feeding in good stuff then people will feed in bad stuff. Maybe it goes back to that thing of being a bit ego-y in thinking that I've got the good stuff. I've got it in a box in my room, and I want to give it out to people bit by bit.
Yeah, so an environment that supports you to share the good stuff you've got. Warm, I think informal and playful, but maybe also something about that discipline piece at the beginning that, that holds you to account to deliver.
Yeah.
Is an environment that works best for you?
Yeah. There has to be some structure. You have to do something to show what it is you've been doing. Otherwise, you might just go and play football in the park or whatever.
Let's put it all together. I want to hear it from you, and then we'll stress test it and see how we're doing. Scribble it down if you haven't already.
I haven't had a pen for about 30 years.
We'll just use your amazing journalistic memory.
Right,
I, Jed, will use my skills in communication and mentoring and my passion for being with young people to pass on my expertise in a way that supports and helps young men to find their feet. An environment that is warm, where we share good stuff, that holds me to account and has sufficient structure to evidence our payoff works best for me.
Yeah. I agree.
Can you play a rough version, like your version of that, back to me?
I, Jed Novick, would see a future in helping and mentoring young people, probably more men than women, in finding and navigating their way on that strange path from being a kid to a grown-up and a kid to an adult, from being supported to being on your own to being... But so many of the students I deal with or dealt with at Brighton would be in the latter half of the third year, who would be having a kind of slight flip out, because there would be, depending on whether they'd taken a year out to go to Vietnam or work in Tesco's or whatever, were 21 or 22, something like this. There's nothing that is waiting for them. There's nothing that they're going to do. There's nothing that they have to get out of bed for in the morning, and there's nothing that they have to get dressed for. And somewhere around about February or March in their third year, this hits so many kids like a rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really difficult moment. And probably in the vast majority of cases, there's a sympathetic home that supports them during that process. There's an awful lot that don't have that. And it would be nice to help out in some way doing that thing.
Yeah, we don't have to know yet how, because what we're trying to get to is what you want to experience. And what I find is that once the question crystallizes of how do I create this kind of experience, how do I make this kind of contribution, then the answer arises off the back of it. So really what we've done today is to kind of clarify, this is what I want to make happen. How could I do it? What's the first next step? And of course, there are some fantastic men and young men's mentoring organizations in Brighton. There's one called Band of Brothers. Amazing work. But I'm sure that there are many other ways and entry points and touch points. And I wonder whether the use of writing, the ability to communicate and connect, to tell stories might be an integral and kind of unique part of how you deliver that as well.
I think so. I hope so. It seems to have a sort of logic to it.
And I would encourage you to build out what we've done into a kind of a little bit more of a written out vision picture that includes exactly that. Where does this sit in life? What are the kind of paces and energy and spaces that you create in your life as you move into this new adventure that suit you? So let's just literally do a pen portrait for 6 months' time, 12 months' time, and see what that brings out.
Right. A mood board. Should we do a mood board?
Mood board, perfect. Yeah, you can definitely do a mood board. Mood boards, vision boards, it just depends whether you're a visual or a writer or a bit of both. So let's see how that starts to take shape. Our last question is always about speaking back to the person who discovered that he was good at something. So there you are on your LCP magazine journalism training, and you've suddenly found your groove. What is it that Jed now, mentoring that 27-year-old version of himself, what advice or coaching would you give back to yourself back then?
Two things to say. If Jed then would look at Jed now, he would bite your hand off. And because things are okay. Things are nice. And life has turned out well. And what I would tell him would be to don't take too much for granted. Hold it a bit tighter.
But tell me, what's your first next step? What's been the most useful thing, and what will you be taking away to do something about on the back of this conversation?
I want to take a little bit of time to think about what to do. You know, like you said, there's lots of organizations and stuff like that deal with the things that I was what we were talking about. You know, do a bit of voluntary stuff, maybe just to sort of, you know, dip my toe in. And I want to have that luxury of time to consider what it does feel like in 6 months' time.
Yeah. Give it some air, give it some space.
Yeah.
Dip your toe, do some little experiments and just see what emerges from it.
Exactly.
Thank you for taking this journey and adventure with me. And I look forward to hearing what taking that time out to smell the trees and just take some space to enjoy yourself, what then floats gently into the Jedosphere and makes, I have no doubt, a really positive contribution, as you have always done, with kind of joyfulness and light. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff. And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosa
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.